A young American airman stands at the open bay of a B-29 bomber 30,000 feet above a Japanese city. In the bomb bay, behind him, hangs a weapon his commanders call Little Boy. 4.5 tons, 10 feet long, and in about 8 minutes it will kill more people than died in the entire siege of Bastogne. Below him, 340,000 people are starting their day. A mother makes breakfast for her children. A businessman hurries to catch his train. Students bow to their teacher as class begins. They have 9 minutes left to live. Rewind 15 months. June 6th, 1944, 3:30 in the morning. The English Channel is black and heaving with storm waves. 5,000 ships disappear into the darkness, the largest armada ever assembled in human history. Inside the landing craft, young men vomit from seasickness and terror. Some clutch photographs of wives and girlfriends. Others pray in whispers. Many write final letters they hope their families will never have to read. One American sergeant turns to his buddy and says, "I'll see you on the beach." He never does. A German machine gun cuts him down the moment the ramp drops. Between that beach and that bomber, between Normandy and Hiroshima, 453 days will unfold. Days that will kill 20 million human beings. Days that will reduce centuries-old cities to ash and rubble. Days that will see an empire built to last 1,000 years collapse in flames after just 12. And days that will end with 2 flashes of light brighter than the sun itself, announcing that humanity has learned to destroy entire cities in a single heartbeat. This is not a story about great men and grand strategy. This is a story about what happens when civilization tears itself apart. When teenagers are handed rifles and told to kill strangers. When mothers watch their children starve in bombed-out cities. When scientists build weapons that can vaporize human beings in microseconds. It's about a German dictator who survived 42 assassination attempts, only to put a gun to his own head in a concrete bunker. About an emperor, worshipped as a living god, forced to tell his people that their divine nation must surrender to mortals. And about the moment when warfare changed forever, when a single bomber carrying a single bomb could do what once required 1,000. From the blood-soaked sand of Omaha Beach to the radioactive ruins of Nagasaki. From Hitler's Atlantic Wall to Hirohito's palace. From D-Day to the day the atomic age began. This is the final chapter, 453 days that ended one world and birthed another. The clock is ticking. The landing craft are hitting the beaches. And somewhere in the New Mexico desert, scientists are about to split the atom. Let's begin. August 19th, 1942. Dawn breaks over the French coastal town of Dieppe. 6,000 Allied troops, mostly Canadians, are about to learn a brutal lesson that will shape the entire future of the war. The landing craft hit the beach at 6:30 in the morning. German machine gunners had been waiting in concrete bunkers overlooking the shoreline. The ramps drop. The killing begins. Canadian soldiers wade through waist-deep water toward a beach covered in large stones. Their supporting tanks bog down immediately, unable to climb over the smooth round rocks. They sit there like steel coffins as German anti-tank guns pick them off one by one. Those who make it to shore are pinned behind a 15-foot concrete seawall. There's nowhere to go. No cover. Just exposed beach and withering fire from above. By noon, it's over. 3,000 men are dead, wounded, or captured. One British colonel watches from his ship as the disaster unfolds. His name is Frederick Morgan, and he's learning something that will save thousands of lives 2 years later. Never, ever attempt a direct assault on a fortified port. By spring of 1943, the Americans are ready to commit. April, Washington, D.C. Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt set a date. D-Day, the seaborne invasion of France, will happen in the summer of 1944. But Hitler knows they're coming. Since the winter of 1941, he's been building what he calls the Atlantic Wall, a chain of fortifications running from Denmark to the Spanish border. 2,000 miles of coastline, thousands of concrete bunkers, gun emplacements covering likely landing beaches. The Führer boasts to his generals, "I am the greatest builder of fortifications of all time." But it has a fatal flaw. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the overall German commander in the West, simply doesn't have enough soldiers to man every mile. 2,000 miles. 15 divisions. Do the math. His answer: hold most of the panzers in reserve northwest of Paris. When the invasion comes, figure out where it's happening, then send in the armour to crush the beachhead. But one man disagrees violently. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The Desert Fox. Hitler's favourite general. In North Africa, Rommel watched Allied aircraft pulverise his supply columns. He saw entire panzer divisions forced to hide during daylight hours. In France, any panzer counterattack will have to drive along predictable routes in broad daylight. Allied aircraft will slaughter them. So Rommel reaches a different conclusion. The panzers need to be positioned right at the most likely landing beaches. Hit the Allies immediately before they establish a beachhead. Throw them back into the sea in the first 24 hours, or lose the war. He tells one subordinate, the war will be won or lost on the beaches. We'll have one chance to stop them, and only one chance. But von Rundstedt refuses. The two field marshals argue bitterly through the fall and winter of 1943. Finally, Hitler himself intervenes with a compromise that satisfies no one. Von Rundstedt gets a small reserve force, but Hitler himself will have the final say on when it can be used. The rest of the troops are scattered along the entire coast, according to Rommel's wishes. It's the worst possible solution. Not enough reserves to mount a serious counterattack. Not enough tanks near the coast to stop an invasion immediately. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, General Frederick Morgan is staring at maps of the French coast. There are really only two options. The Pas de Calais, the shortest distance across the Channel, only 21 miles of water. It also offers the most direct route into Germany itself, which is exactly why Morgan rules it out. Too obvious. The Germans are expecting it. So Morgan looks south. Normandy. Further from England, about 100 miles. Longer supply lines. No major ports nearby. But also fewer German divisions defending it. And wide, relatively flat beaches suitable for landing tanks. Morgan makes his choice. Normandy it is. Now comes the hard part, making the Germans believe the invasion will hit somewhere else. Late 1943. British engineers come up with something extraordinary. They call them mulberries. Giant hollow concrete boxes, some as tall as a 5-story building, constructed in secret locations around Britain. Each one weighs 6,000 tons. The plan: tow them across the channel after the invasion, sink them in precise formations to create an artificial harbour where none exists. It's insane. It's unprecedented. And it just might work. They also build Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. Giant reels of flexible steel pipe, each one 70 miles of tubing. The pumping station is built on the Isle of Wight and disguised as an ice cream parlour. Enter Major General Percy Hobart. 79 years old. Given an unusual assignment, solve the problem of getting troops through Hitler's beach defences. Hobart's solution: modify tanks to do jobs they were never designed for. The troops start calling them Hobart's funnies. The Crab, a tank with a rotating drum covered in heavy chains that flail the ground ahead, detonating mines. The Bobbin, a tank that lays reinforced matting as it drives, creating a firm roadway across soft sand. The Crocodile, a tank equipped with a flamethrower that can shoot burning liquid 200 feet. The AVRE, carrying a massive mortar that fires 40-pound explosive charges to blow holes through concrete walls. And the strangest, the DD tank, duplex drive. Take a 30-ton Sherman tank. Surround it with an inflatable canvas screen that makes it float. Add propellers. It swims to the beach. It looks absurd. But when it works, it means the first troops hitting the beach have tank support immediately. While engineers prepare equipment, the Allies launch Operation Bodyguard, the most elaborate deception campaign in military history. Fields across southeastern England fill with an army that doesn't exist. Inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, dummy landing craft. Real soldiers drive trucks around these fake bases, kicking up dust. Radio operators broadcast endless streams of fake military communications. And commanding this phantom force, General George S. Patton. 2 pearl-handled revolvers strapped to his waist. Currently sidelined after slapping shell-shocked soldiers in Sicily. The Germans rate Patton as the Allies' most dangerous attacking general. The man they'd expect to lead the invasion. So the Allies put him in command of Fusag, the First United States Army Group, a completely fictitious force that exists only on paper and in German intelligence reports. It works. By spring of 1944, German intelligence is convinced the main invasion will strike the Pas de Calais, with Patton leading it. Starting in April 1944, 2 months before D-Day, Allied bombers begin a systematic campaign to destroy bridges, rail lines, and roads throughout northern France. But for every target hit in Normandy, 2 targets are bombed near the Pas de Calais. The deception continues even in the choice of what to destroy. By June, the Allies have assembled a force unlike anything ever seen. 2 million troops, 39 divisions, 11,000 aircraft, 7,000 naval vessels. All of it pointed at a 60-mile stretch of Norman coastline. In the spring of 1944, Eisenhower sets a date. June 5th. Then on June 3rd, the weather turns. Storms sweep across the English Channel. Rain lashes down. Winds reach gale force. Eisenhower faces the worst decision of his life. June 4th, early morning. The meteorologists deliver their report. The storm will continue through June 5th. Launching the invasion tomorrow would be catastrophic. Eisenhower makes the call. Postponement. Then, on the evening of June 4th, the senior meteorologist returns with new information. There's a break coming in the weather. Not much of one, maybe 36 hours. But it might be enough. Long silence. Then Eisenhower looks up and says 4 words that will change history. Okay, let's go. 1:15 in the morning, June 6th, 1944. 6 British gliders plunge silently through the darkness toward northern France. The first glider hits at 90 miles per hour. Wings shear off. The fuselage skids across French soil. The ramp drops, and British troops pour out just yards from the Caen Canal Bridge, their objective. Within 10 minutes, the bridge is in British hands. It's the first Allied objective captured on D-Day, is less than #3. 0 hash is greater than. 50 miles to the west, American paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions stand in the open doors of transport aircraft. The plan falls apart immediately. German anti-aircraft fire is heavier than expected. Pilots take evasive action. The neat formation breaks apart into chaos. Some paratroopers land in Sainte-Mère-Église, right in the middle of town. They're shot before they hit the ground. Others land in flooded fields. Weighed down with 60 pounds of equipment, some men drown in 4 feet of water. But some units land close to their objectives. By 3 in the morning, American paratroopers have seized Sainte-Mère-Église, the first French town liberated on D-Day. 5:30 in the morning. 7 battleships, 23 cruisers, and over 100 destroyers open fire on the Norman coast. The sound is beyond description. When all the ships fire at once, the concussion rolls across the water like a physical force. But many bunkers survive. And inside those surviving bunkers, German soldiers wait at their machine guns. 6:30 in the morning. The first wave of landing craft approaches the shore. 5 beaches, codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword, stretching 60 miles along the Norman coast. 30,000 men are about to hit those beaches in the next hour. Utah Beach turns out to be the luckiest. Strong currents push the landing craft 2,000 yards south of the intended beach. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr. realizes they've landed in the wrong place. He looks at the defenses on this accidental beach, lighter than expected, and makes a decision that will save hundreds of lives. We'll start the war from right here. By the end of the day, fewer than 200 casualties. Utah is a success. 6 miles to the east, Omaha Beach is becoming hell on earth. The plan calls for DD tanks to land first. But the sea is much rougher than expected. 29 tanks are launched. 27 sink immediately. Which means the first wave of infantry hits Omaha Beach with almost no tank support. The Germans are waiting. Allied planners thought Omaha was defended by a single understrength regiment. But the Germans had reinforced it just weeks before with a full-strength division. Machine gun fire cuts through them like a scythe. Bodies float in the surf. The water turns red. Those who make it to the beach find no cover except a low shingle bank. They're pinned there by withering fire from the bluffs. For 2 hours, it looks like Omaha will be a catastrophic failure. Then small groups of men begin to move. Engineers blow gaps in the wire. A few Sherman tanks that manage to get ashore begin moving forward. It's not a coordinated assault, it's small groups of desperate men fighting their way forward yard by yard. By nightfall, 34,000 men are ashore at Omaha. But they've advanced barely a mile inland. The cost is staggering, over 2,000 casualties. At Gold Beach, the British 50th Infantry Division uses Hobart's funnies to devastating effect. The crabs flail the beach ahead, clearing lanes through minefields. AVREs blow holes through concrete obstacles. Crocodile flamethrower tanks incinerate German bunkers. Within hours, the British are pushing inland. Next door at Juneau Beach, the Canadians arrive 30 minutes late. The tide has risen, covering many underwater obstacles. Landing craft run onto hidden mines and explode. But again, Hobart's funnies make the difference. By the end of D-Day, the Canadians have advanced 6 miles from the beach. At Sword Beach, the British 3rd Infantry Division meets only scattered resistance. By afternoon, British commandos have linked up with the paratroopers holding Pegasus Bridge. But where are the Germans? Erwin Rommel isn't even in France. He's in Germany visiting his wife. It's her birthday. His second-in-command is over 100 miles away, participating in a war game. Only Field Marshal von Rundstedt is at his headquarters when the reports start coming in. But he's not sure what's happening. Is this the main invasion or a diversion? He needs to release the Panzer reserves. But he needs Hitler's personal authorization. And Hitler is asleep at his mountain retreat in Bavaria. His aides refuse to wake him. Finally, at noon, 5.5 hours after the first troops hit the beaches, Hitler wakes up and learns about the invasion. He doesn't believe it's real. He's convinced this is the diversion, that the real attack will still come at the Pas de Calais. He orders the Panzer reserves to stay where they are. Not until late afternoon does Hitler finally authorize the panzers to move. By then, it's too late. By nightfall, on June 6, 1944, 156,000 Allied troops are ashore in Normandy. Nowhere have they reached their planned objectives. But they're ashore, and they're not getting pushed back into the sea. The cost: 10,000 Allied casualties. The Allies have their foothold in Hitler's Europe. Now comes the hard part: breaking out. June 7th, the day after D-Day. American soldiers pushing inland from Omaha Beach discover something their maps didn't prepare them for. The bocage. Norman hedgerows, centuries-old walls of earth and vegetation that divide the countryside into thousands of tiny fields. Each hedge is 4 or 5 feet thick, 6 to 15 feet tall. Every field becomes its own little battlefield. Progress is measured in yards per day, not miles. A week after D-Day, Montgomery launches his first major attempt to capture Caen. He sends in the 7th Armoured Division, the famous Desert Rats. Near Villers-Bocage, a lone German Tiger tank is hiding behind a building. The German tank commander, SS officer Michael Wittmann, waits until the British column is strung out and vulnerable. Then he opens fire. In less than 5 minutes, Wittmann single-handedly destroys or disables over a dozen British tanks and halts the entire advance. It's a stark demonstration of a problem that will plague the Allies for the rest of the Normandy campaign. German tanks are better. The Tiger weighs 60 tons and mounts an 88mm gun that can punch through a Sherman's frontal armour from a mile away. The Sherman's 75mm gun can barely scratch a Tiger even at close range. German tankers call the Sherman the Tommy Cooker. It runs on gasoline, so when hit, it tends to burst into flames. Allied tankers grimly joke that they need 4 Shermans to kill 1 Tiger, 1 to draw fire while the other 3 maneuver around to shoot it in the rear. June 19th, 13 days after D-Day. A storm sweeps across the English Channel, the worst June storm in 40 years. For 3 days, Waves 15 feet high hammer the Normandy beaches. The American Mulberry Harbor at Omaha Beach is completely destroyed. Gone. It will never be rebuilt. The flow of reinforcements and supplies slows to a trickle. Meanwhile, pressure on Hitler is mounting. In the east, Stalin has just launched a massive offensive. In Italy, Allied forces have captured Rome. And in Germany itself, a conspiracy is forming. July 20th, 1944, 12:42 p.m. A conference room at Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg places a briefcase containing 2 pounds of plastic explosive under the conference table, close to where Hitler is standing. The bomb explodes. The wooden building disintegrates. 4 officers are killed instantly. But the heavy oak table shields Hitler from the worst of the blast. His eardrums are ruptured. His legs are bruised. His hair is singed. But he's alive. Within hours, Hitler is on the radio. The coup collapses. Stauffenberg is shot in the courtyard by firing squad that evening. Over the next months, the Gestapo will arrest 7,000 people connected to the plot. Nearly 5,000 will be executed. The failed assassination intensifies Hitler's paranoia. He trusts his generals even less. He begins overruling their military judgment even more frequently. July 25th, 9:30 in the morning. American troops south of the Normandy beachhead look up to see the sky turn dark with aircraft. 1,800 bombers are approaching. Their target, a 4-mile stretch of German front line. Operation Cobra, the American breakout from Normandy, is about to begin. Some bombs fall on American positions. Over 100 Americans die from friendly fire. But the German defenders have it worse, much worse. 4,000 tons of bombs fall in under an hour. The earth itself seems to convulse. Men are buried alive in collapsed bunkers. When American infantry and tanks advance, they run into pockets of Germans who somehow survived and are still fighting. Progress is slow, only 1,000 yards the first day. But the German line has been fundamentally broken. July 26. American tanks find gaps and pour through. The breakthrough becomes a flood. July 28, General Patton, finally given command of a real army, unleashes his Third Army through the gap. This is what Patton was born to do. His tanks race south and west, moving faster than some German units can retreat. By the end of July, the Americans are advancing 30 miles a day. The German line in Normandy is collapsing. After 7 weeks of grinding, bloody stalemate in the hedgerows, the Allies are finally breaking out. And Hitler's fortress Europe is about to crumble. August 1st, 1944. George Patton's Third Army officially becomes operational and immediately starts moving so fast it outstrips its own supply lines. Within a week, Patton's tanks have covered over 100 miles. They take Rennes, then turn east toward Le Mans. Hitler makes a catastrophic decision. Instead of pulling back, he orders a counterattack aimed at cutting off Patton's advance. The German counterattack begins on the night of August 6th. Then dawn breaks, and Allied aircraft own the sky. Wave after wave of fighter bombers swarm over the German column. Rockets slam into tanks. Bombs crater the roads. The German counterattack grinds to a halt within 24 hours. Worse, they've now concentrated most of their remaining armour in a bulge that's vulnerable to encirclement. Patton sees it immediately. His Third Army is south of the German bulge. Montgomery's forces are north of it. If both armies turn inward, they can trap the entire German force in Normandy. What follows becomes known as the Falaise Gap. August 12th through August 21st, 10 days of slaughter. Allied artillery pounds the roads day and night. Aircraft attack anything that moves. The carnage is beyond description. By the time the pocket is closed, 10,000 Germans are dead. 50,000 are captured. Field Marshal Günther von Kluge writes a final letter to Hitler, accepting full responsibility. Then he swallows a cyanide capsule. August 15th, the French Riviera. American and French troops land near Cannes in Operation Dragoon, a second invasion of France from the Mediterranean. The landings are almost unopposed. Within days, they're racing up the Rhône Valley. August 25th, Paris. The German military commander has orders from Hitler to destroy the city rather than let it fall intact. He doesn't obey is less than Haschen. 5 hash is greater than. Free French forces enter Paris. By afternoon, the Germans surrender. Parisians flood into the streets. They've been living under German occupation for 4 years. Now they're free. Charles de Gaulle arrives that afternoon and leads a victory parade down the Champs-Élysées. September 3rd, American forces advancing from the south link up with Patton's Third Army at Dijon. Most of France is now liberated. The same day, British forces enter Brussels. September 4th, the British Second Army captures Antwerp, Belgium's major port, completely intact. The Allies now have the port they desperately need. Except they don't. Antwerp sits 40 miles inland from the sea, and the Germans still control both banks of the Scheldt estuary. Opening Antwerp will require a massive operation. That operation won't even begin for another month. In the meantime, Allied supplies are still coming through the Normandy beaches, hundreds of miles away. The Americans organized the Red Ball Express, a one-way loop of roads reserved exclusively for supply trucks. 6,000 trucks run day and night. But it's not enough. An American armored division needs about 25,000 gallons of fuel per day. The Red Ball Express simply can't deliver that much over hundreds of miles of battered French roads. By early September, Patton's Third Army is literally running out of gas. The headlong advance that liberated France in 3 weeks begins to slow. They're running up against Germany's western border, with fuel tanks running on empty and ammunition stocks running low. The race is over. Unless Montgomery can pull off one more surprise. September 10th, 1944. Montgomery presents a plan to Eisenhower that's so un-Montgomery-like that some of his staff think he's lost his mind. Operation Market Garden. The plan: drop 30,000 paratroopers to seize a series of bridges in Holland. Then send an armoured column racing up a single road, crossing each bridge in turn until they've crossed the Rhine River at Arnhem. Once across the Rhine, the war could be over by Christmas. Eisenhower approves it. September 17th, 1 p.m. The largest airborne operation of the war begins. The US 101st Airborne drops around Eindhoven. The US 82nd drops near Grave and Nijmegen. The British 1st Airborne drops near Arnhem, 64 miles behind German lines. The American drops go reasonably well. The 101st quickly captures Vegel. But at Zonn, Germans blow the bridge. The 82nd captures the bridge at Grave intact. But Nijmegen is heavily defended and will take days to capture. At Arnhem, disaster. British intelligence missed something crucial. 2 SS Panzer divisions are refitting just outside Arnhem. The British paratroopers drop practically on top of them. One battalion, about 600 men under Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, makes it to the northern end of the Arnhem Bridge by evening. The other battalions are stopped miles from the bridge. Frost's men dig in and wait for the ground forces to arrive. British tanks of the XXX Corps start rolling up a single road from Belgium toward Eindhoven. The road is elevated above the surrounding countryside, which the Germans have flooded. Tanks can't leave the road without sinking into mud, which makes it perfect for an ambush. German troops with anti-tank guns hit the lead British tanks. The column stops. By the end of the first day, XXX Corps has advanced only 7 miles, barely a tenth of what they need. At Arnhem, Frost's battalion is surrounded. German tanks and infantry attack from both ends. British paratroopers fight from buildings with decreasing ammunition and no hope of reinforcement. The radios don't work. Communication breaks down. Reinforcement drops land directly into German positions. Men are shot as they drift down. September 19th, XXX Corps finally reaches Nijmegen after 2 days. American paratroopers assault the bridge in a desperate daylight attack crossing the Waal River in flimsy canvas boats under withering fire. They take the bridge. Now, XXX Corps can continue toward Arnhem, only 10 miles away. But at Arnhem, it's already too late. September 20th, after 4 days and nights of continuous fighting, Colonel Frost's ammunition finally runs out. The Germans take the bridge. September 25th, night evacuation. Under cover of darkness, the survivors withdraw across the Rhine in small boats. Of the 10,000 British paratroopers dropped at Arnhem, only 2,400 escape. 1,700 are dead. 6,000 are captured. A bridge too far. Market Garden uses up resources and time that could have been spent on opening the port of Antwerp. It's not until October 1st that the Allies finally launch an operation to clear the Scheldt estuary. Canadian forces fight their way along both banks. The Germans have flooded much of the area. November 1st, British commandos assault Walcheren Island. After a week of brutal fighting, the island falls. November 28th, 11 weeks after Antwerp was captured, the first supply ships finally reached the port. By then, autumn rains have turned the battlefield into mud. The Allied advance has ground to a halt all along the German border. The war will not be over by Christmas. It's going to be a long, cold winter. And Hitler has one more surprise in store. December 16, 1944, 5:30 in the morning. The Ardennes forest on the Belgian-German border. Snow covers the ground. Mist hangs between the trees. American soldiers manning thinly held positions along an 80-mile front are drinking coffee, writing letters home, thinking about Christmas. Then the world explodes. 2,000 German artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. The ground shakes. Trees splinter. American foxholes collapse from the concussion. For 90 minutes, the bombardment continues. Then out of the mist come German panzers, 250,000 troops, 950 tanks, the last strategic reserve Hitler can scrape together. Germany is launching its final offensive in the West. Hitler's plan is desperate, but potentially brilliant. Drive through the Ardennes, the same route Germany used in 1940 to conquer France. Split the American and British armies. Race 100 miles to the coast and recapture Antwerp. Cut off Allied supplies and the offensive might collapse. Force the Western Allies to negotiate. Then turn everything east to face the Soviets. It's insane. But Hitler has nothing left to lose. The Americans are caught completely by surprise. General Omar Bradley, commanding the US 12th Army Group, refuses to believe it's a major attack. Just a spoiling action, he tells his staff. He's catastrophically wrong. German troops pour through gaps in the American lines. Some US units are overrun before they can even call for help. Others fight desperate rearguard actions, trying to slow the advance. Making it worse, Hitler has sent in special forces wearing captured American uniforms, driving captured American jeeps, speaking perfect English. Their mission: spread chaos, cut communications, redirect traffic, assassinate officers. Paranoia spreads through American lines. Soldiers stop each other at gunpoint, demanding passwords. Officers are questioned about American sports trivia to prove they're not Germans in disguise. Even General Bradley is stopped at a checkpoint and interrogated. Any German caught wearing an American uniform is shot on the spot as a spy. December 17, near the village of Malmedy. SS Colonel Joachim Paper's battle group captures about 150 American soldiers from an artillery observation unit. Piper is in a hurry, racing for fuel depots he desperately needs. He doesn't want to waste time guarding prisoners. He orders them shot. The Americans are herded into a field. German machine guns open fire. 84 men are murdered in the snow. When other American units retake the area days later and find the frozen bodies, the word spreads like wildfire. The Malmedy Massacre. From this point forward, many American soldiers stop taking SS prisoners. The fighting becomes even more savage. December 18, the town of Bastogne. A critical crossroads in the center of the German advance. 7 roads converge here. Whoever controls Bastogne controls movement through the entire region. The Americans rush in reinforcements, the 101st Airborne Division, still recovering from Market Garden. They dig in around the town just hours before German panzers arrive. The Germans try to punch through. The paratroopers hold. Unable to break the defense, the Germans simply bypass Bastogne and continue west. But now they've left a heavily armed American force sitting astride their supply lines. December 21st, German forces surround Bastogne. The siege begins. The Americans inside have limited ammunition, no medical supplies, and dwindling food. The weather is bitterly cold. Heavy cloud cover means no air resupply, no air support. December 22nd, a German delegation approaches under a white flag with an ultimatum. Surrender or be annihilated. The acting American commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, reads the surrender demand and gives a one-word reply. Nuts. The confused German officers ask for clarification. An American translator tells them it means, "Go to hell." The siege continues. But by now, the weather is changing. December 23, the clouds break. For the first time in a week, Allied aircraft can fly. Thousands of them take to the air. Fighter bombers swarm over the German columns. Supply trucks explode. Fuel tankers burn. The German advance, already desperately short of gasoline, grinds slower. Transport planes drop supplies to Bastogne. Ammunition, medical supplies, food. The defenders hold on. And from the south, Patton is coming. December 22nd, 70 miles south of Bastogne. Patton's Third Army has performed a miracle of military maneuvering. In less than 72 hours, he's disengaged from combat on the Saar River, pivoted his entire army 90 degrees north, and is now attacking toward Bastogne through a blizzard. It's something military experts will study for decades, one of the most impressive battlefield maneuvers of the entire war. December 26, Patton's lead tanks smash through the German lines surrounding Bastogne. The siege is broken. But Hitler has one more card to play. January 1st, 1945, dawn. Operation Bodenplatte, baseplate. The Luftwaffe launches its largest single-day operation since the Battle of Britain. Over 800 aircraft attack Allied airfields across Belgium and Holland. They achieve complete surprise. Dozens of Allied aircraft are destroyed on the ground. Some airfields are temporarily knocked out of action. But it's a Pyrrhic victory. The Luftwaffe loses 300 planes, shot down by anti-aircraft fire or Allied fighters scrambling to intercept. Worse, they lose nearly 200 experienced pilots. Germany can build more planes, but pilots take years to train. These losses are irreplaceable. It's the Luftwaffe's death blow. By early January, the German offensive has run out of steam. The panzers are out of fuel. The supply lines are too extended. Allied air power is devastating them in daylight. American and British forces begin squeezing the bulge from north and south. The Germans who penetrated deepest are now in danger of being cut off. Hitler refuses to authorize a retreat until it's almost too late. German forces withdraw, fighting desperate rearguard actions. Many units are destroyed trying to escape. By the end of January, the front line is back roughly where it started. But the cost to Germany is catastrophic. 100,000 casualties, killed, wounded, or captured. 700 tanks destroyed or abandoned. Thousands of vehicles lost. And all of it was Germany's strategic reserve, the last mobile force capable of conducting offensive operations. Hitler has gambled everything on one desperate throw of the dice. And lost. Germany is now defenseless on both fronts. But the Battle of the Bulge is just one catastrophe in a year of catastrophes for Germany. To understand what's happening in the West, we need to look east to Poland and to decisions Stalin made months earlier. Summer 1944, late July. The Soviet Red Army has swept across Byelorussia in a massive offensive that destroyed an entire German army group. Now Soviet forces approach the Polish capital of Warsaw. They stop. For 6 weeks, the Red Army sits on the east bank of the Vistula River, just 40 miles from Warsaw, and does nothing. Stalin is waiting. July 29th. Moscow radio broadcasts to Poland. The hour of liberation is at hand, the announcer proclaims, is less than Hasson. 0# is greater than people of Warsaw, 2 arms, attack the Germans. August 1st, 1 p.m. The Polish Home Army, the main resistance movement, loyal to the Polish government in exile in London, rises up against the German occupation. 40,000 fighters take to the streets. They're armed, mostly with captured German weapons, pistols, gasoline bombs. Many have no weapons at all, expecting to take them from dead Germans. In the first 48 hours, they capture 2/3 of the city. Then the counterattack begins. Hitler sends SS General Erich von dem Bach-Zelewski to crush the uprising. Bach-Zelewski is an expert in anti-partisan warfare, which means he's an expert in atrocities. His troops move through Warsaw systematically, block by block. Wounded prisoners are burned alive. Women and children are used as human shields. Entire buildings are demolished with civilians still inside. The Polish fighters send desperate messages to London and Moscow. Where is the Red Army? When will they attack? The Red Army does nothing. Stalin's calculation is brutally simple. The Polish Home Army is led by officers loyal to the pre-war Polish government, the same government now in exile in London. They're anti-communist. They represent Poland's old order. Stalin has his own plans for Poland after the war. Plans that involve a communist government loyal to Moscow. Plans that don't include the Home Army's leadership. So he lets the Germans do his work for him. The Polish fighters are pushed back, street by street, building by building. They retreat into the sewers. Germans pump in poison gas. They hole up in cellars. Germans demolish entire buildings on top of them. Churchill begs Stalin to help. Stalin refuses, calling the Home Army criminals and adventurers, conducting an irresponsible action. When British aircraft try to drop supplies to the Polish fighters, Stalin refuses to let them land at Soviet airfields to refuel. Most of the planes can't make the round trip without refueling. The supply drops are largely ineffective. October 2nd, after 63 days of fighting, the Home Army surrenders. 15,000 fighters are dead. 200,000 civilians have been killed in the fighting or deliberately murdered. Hitler orders the complete destruction of what remains of Warsaw. For the next several months, German demolition teams systematically level the city. Block by block, building by building. When they're done, 90% of Warsaw is rubble. Only then does the Red Army cross the Vistula and occupy the ruins. Stalin has secured Poland for communism. The cost was 250,000 Polish lives. He doesn't care. October 9th, 1944, Moscow. Winston Churchill arrives for a meeting with Stalin. Churchill has come to negotiate spheres of influence in post-war Europe. The British Prime Minister knows the Red Army is liberating Eastern Europe and will soon control it. He wants to salvage what he can for the West. During a late-night meeting, Churchill scribbles on a piece of paper. Romania, 90% Soviet influence. Greece, 90% British influence. Bulgaria, 75% Soviet. Hungary and Yugoslavia, 50-50. He pushes the paper across to Stalin. Stalin reads it, takes out a blue pencil, makes a large check mark, and pushes it back. Churchill will later call it the naughty document. It's imperialism of the old school, two empires dividing up Europe like it's still 1815. The Americans, when they find out, will be outraged. But it's also an acknowledgement of reality. The Red Army is going to occupy most of Eastern Europe. Churchill is trying to preserve what influence he can. December, Greece. The Germans withdraw from Greece as Soviet forces approach from the north. Immediately, the country descends into civil war between communist partisans and royalist forces. Churchill, claiming his 90%, sends in British troops to support the royalists. Fighting erupts in Athens. British soldiers fire on Greek communists in the streets. It's brutal, confused, morally ambiguous. The Americans are appalled. President Roosevelt condemns it as imperialism. But Stalin says nothing. He got his 90% in Romania. He's keeping his side of the bargain. For now. January 12, 1945, 5 a.m. The Soviet winter offensive begins. Along a 300-mile front from the Baltic to the Carpathian Mountains, Soviet artillery opens fire. 4 million shells in the first 2 hours. Then comes the infantry. Then the tanks. Wave after wave after wave. The Germans are outnumbered 11-1 in infantry. The Soviets have overwhelming superiority in tanks, artillery, and aircraft. And Germany's strategic reserve, everything that might have stopped this offensive, was just destroyed in the Battle of the Bulge. The German line shatters. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the Soviet Union's greatest commander, leads the charge. His forces advance at a pace that stuns even German veterans who remember the Blitzkrieg of 1940. 30 miles on the first day, 40 miles the second day. German units are bypassed, surrounded, destroyed. Entire divisions cease to exist. Army groups lose contact with each other. January 17th, Soviet forces enter Warsaw. Or what's left of Warsaw. The city is a field of rubble. The advance continues. By the end of January, just 19 days after the offensive began, Zhukov's forces have advanced 300 miles. 300 miles in 19 days. one of the fastest sustained advances in military history. They've crossed the German border. They've reached the Oder River. Berlin is 40 miles away. The German civilian population in the east panics. They've heard the stories of what Soviet troops do in occupied territory. Revenge for what the Germans did in Russia. Rape, murder, pillage. 5 million German civilians flee west ahead of the Red Army. In the dead of winter, in blizzards and sub-zero temperatures, families pack what they can carry onto carts and sleds and walk. The roads are jammed with refugees. Old people collapse and freeze to death in the snow. Children are separated from their families in the chaos. Those who can't walk try to evacuate by sea from Baltic ports like Danzig and Königsberg. January 30th, 1945. The Wilhelm Gustloff, a German cruise liner converted to a refugee transport, departs from Gotenhafen with over 10,000 people aboard. Mostly women, children, and wounded soldiers. Designed to carry fewer than 2,000 passengers, now packed with 5 times that number. 9 p.m. that night, Soviet submarine S-13 spots the ship. Captain Alexander Marinesko fires 3 torpedoes. All 3 hit. The Wilhelm Gustloff sinks in 45 minutes. In water so cold that anyone who goes in dies within minutes. Over 9,000 people drown or freeze to death. It's the deadliest maritime disaster in history. 6 times worse than the Titanic. And almost nobody outside Germany will ever hear about it. By early February, the Red Army pauses to consolidate its positions along the Oder. The supply lines are overextended. The troops are exhausted. Before they can assault Berlin, they need to bring up reinforcements, ammunition, fuel. The pause will last 2 months. But the end is clearly in sight. From the west, American and British forces are preparing to cross the Rhine. From the east, Soviet forces are 40 miles from Berlin. Hitler's Third Reich, the 1,000-year Reich that was supposed to last a millennium, is in its death throes after just 12 years. The only question now is who reaches Berlin first. February 1945. Allied forces all along the German border prepare for the final push into the Reich. The Rhine River is the last major natural barrier protecting Germany's industrial heartland. Once across, the Allies will have a clear path to the Ruhr, the region that produces 80% of Germany's steel and coal. Hitler has ordered every bridge destroyed. Not one bridge is to fall into enemy hands intact, he rages at his generals. March 7th, 1945, early afternoon. 9th Armoured Division is pushing through the German town of Remagen on the west bank of the Rhine. As American tanks roll down the hill toward the river, the crews see something that makes them stop and stare. The Ludendorff Bridge, a massive railway bridge, is still standing. The bridge is still up, the bridge is still up, is less than #3. Zero hash is greater than American infantry race toward it. German engineers on the bridge frantically try to detonate the demolition charges. There's an explosion. The bridge shudders. Chunks of concrete fall into the river. But the bridge doesn't collapse. American soldiers sprint across, cutting every wire they can find. German machine guns fire from the far bank. Men fall, but others keep coming. Within an hour, American troops are across the Rhine. For the first time since Napoleon, a hostile army has crossed the Rhine into Germany from the west. The news reaches Hitler at his bunker headquarters. He explodes in rage. 5 officers are immediately court-martialed for failing to destroy the bridge. 4 are shot by firing squad. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, commanding German forces in the west, is sacked for the second time in less than a year. Replaced by Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. But it's too late. American troops and equipment pour across the bridge for the next week. Engineers frantically repair damage and reinforce the structure. March 17th, 2:30 p.m. Without warning, the Ludendorff Bridge collapses. 28 American engineers working on repairs plunge into the Rhine. Most drown. But by then it doesn't matter. Pontoon bridges have been built alongside it. The troops and tanks keep flowing across. While engineers work frantically at Remagen, further south, General George Patton is planning his own crossing. March 22nd, night. Patton's Third Army crosses the Rhine at Oppenheim with almost no fanfare. Assault boats paddle across in darkness. German resistance is minimal. Most defenders are watching for an attack elsewhere. By morning, Patton has his bridgehead. He immediately calls his superior, General Omar Bradley. "Don't tell anyone," Patton says with barely concealed glee, "but I'm across." He's beaten Montgomery to it. And that matters to Patton almost as much as beating the Germans. Because Montgomery is planning his crossing as a massive set-piece operation, the kind of carefully orchestrated assault he loves. March 23rd, evening. 200 RAF Lancaster bombers carpet bomb the town of Wessel on the east bank of the Rhine. The town simply ceases to exist. Midnight. British and Canadian troops cross the Rhine in Buffalo amphibious vehicles and assault boats. They meet scattered resistance from dazed German defenders. By dawn, the bridgehead is secure. March 24th, 10 a.m. Operation Varsity, the largest single-day airborne operation of the war. 17,000 paratroopers from the British 6th and US 17th Airborne Divisions drop east of the Rhine. 1,600 transport aircraft, 1,300 gliders. German anti-aircraft fire is intense. Planes explode in mid-air. Gliders are hit before landing and crash in balls of flame. Paratroopers are shot as they drift down. Over 50% of the gliders are destroyed or damaged before landing. But the airborne troops seize their objectives: bridges, crossroads, high ground. By afternoon, they've linked up with ground forces pushing inland from the Rhine. Montgomery's crossing is a success. By early April, American forces are fanning out across western Germany. They encircle the Ruhr industrial region, trapping over 300,000 German troops. For 2 weeks, the Germans fight back from the cities and factories. But they're cut off, surrounded, running out of ammunition. April 18th, the Ruhr pocket surrenders. 325,000 German soldiers lay down their arms. It's the largest mass surrender on the Western Front. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding the trapped forces, refuses to surrender personally. He walks into a forest alone and shoots himself. The road to Berlin is open. But the Americans won't take it. At a conference in February, the Yalta Conference in the Crimea, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin agreed to divide Germany into occupation zones. Berlin lies deep inside the Soviet zone, over 100 miles inside. Eisenhower decides not to race the Soviets to Berlin. The political boundaries have already been drawn. Why lose American lives fighting for territory that will be handed to the Soviets anyway? Instead, American forces spread out across southern Germany. They're told to advance east until they meet the Red Army coming west. The race for Berlin belongs to Stalin alone. But as Allied forces advance into Germany from both east and west, they begin making discoveries that will shock the world. April 4th, 1945. US troops from the 89th Infantry Division enter a small work camp near Weimar called Ohrdruf. What they find defies comprehension. Bodies stacked like cordwood. Living skeletons who can barely walk. Mass graves. The SS guards fled just hours before. But they didn't have time to hide the evidence. General Eisenhower visits 3 days later. He's visibly shaken. He orders every nearby American unit to tour the camp. He wants them to see what they're fighting against. We are told the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for, Eisenhower says. Now, at least, he will know what he is fighting against. But Ohrdruf is just a work camp. Small, relatively minor. The real horror is still to come. April 15th, British forces enter Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in northern Germany. 70,000 prisoners. Thousands already dead and unburied. Corpses lying in piles. The living are barely distinguishable from the dead. Skeletal figures with hollow eyes. Too weak to stand. Dying of typhus and starvation. BBC correspondent Richard Dimbleby is with the British troops. His broadcast will haunt Britain. I passed through the barrier and found myself in the world of a nightmare, he reports. The living lay with their heads against the corpses, and around them moved the awful ghostly procession of emaciated, aimless people with nothing to do and no hope of life. This is what the Germans did, Dimbleby concludes. Let there be no mistake about it. But even Bergen-Belsen isn't the worst. The Soviet army had already liberated the extermination camps in Poland months earlier. Auschwitz-Birkenau in January. Majdanek the previous summer. These weren't just concentration camps. They were death factories. 6 camps designed specifically for mass murder. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, Majdanek. All in Poland. Jews from across occupied Europe transported in cattle cars. Arrival at the camps. Selection on the platform. Able-bodied men and some women sent to work camps, to be worked to death as slaves. Everyone else, children, elderly, most women, sent directly to gas chambers disguised as showers. Zyklon B crystals dropped through roof vents. Up to 2,000 people killed at once. Bodies removed by prisoner work units called Sonderkommandos. Burned in crematoria or open pits. At Auschwitz-Birkenau, the capacity was 10,000 murders per day. Personal belongings sorted and shipped back to Germany. Gold teeth melted down. Hair used for fabric. It was industrialized genocide. Mass murder as a production line. The final count, 6 million Jews murdered. Roma, disabled people, political prisoners, Soviet POWs, homosexuals, millions more. The Germans devoted trains, troops, resources to extermination even as the Reich collapsed around them. Even as they desperately needed those trains for military supplies, they prioritized sending Jews to death camps. The hatred was that complete. When the full scope becomes clear after the war, a new phrase enters human vocabulary. The Holocaust. And with it, a question that will haunt humanity. How could civilized people do this? There are no good answers. Only the determination that it must never happen again. April 1945. While the Red Army prepares its final assault on Berlin, the Western Allies are finishing the conquest of Germany from the west. In the north, Montgomery's Canadian First Army is pushing through Holland. The Dutch have suffered terribly through the winter of 44 to 45. The Germans deliberately cut off food supplies to the Western Netherlands as punishment for railway strikes. The Hunger Winter, they call it. 20,000 Dutch civilians starved to death. People ate tulip bulbs to survive. Families burned furniture to stay warm. April 15th, Canadian troops liberate Arnhem. The site of Market Garden's failure, 7 months earlier. April 16th, Groningen falls. By late April, a German army of about 120,000 troops is surrounded near Amsterdam. Rather than fight a bloody battle through Dutch cities, the Canadians negotiate. The Germans agree to stop fighting and allow food drops to the starving civilian population. Allied bombers, the same aircraft that recently dropped bombs on German cities, now fly over Holland dropping food. Bread, flour, chocolate, canned meat. The packages drift down on parachutes. Dutch civilians flood into the streets, weeping with relief. Further south, the British Second Army is fighting through the German port city of Bremen. The Germans defend fanatically. Every street becomes a battlefield, every building a fortress. For 9 days, British troops fight house to house. Snipers in the rubble, machine gun nests in cellars, tank traps and improvised mines. April 26. Bremen finally falls. April 25th, 75 miles south of Berlin. Near the town of Torgau, on the Elbe River. US troops advancing from the west spot Soviet soldiers on the far bank. For a moment, everyone just stares. Then an American lieutenant named Albert Kotzebue gets in a boat and rows across. The meeting is chaotic, joyous, confused. Americans and Soviets embrace. They don't speak each other's languages, but communicate through gestures and smiles. Someone produces vodka. Someone else has whiskey. Toasts are drunk to Roosevelt, who died suddenly just 2 weeks earlier. To Churchill. To Stalin. Germany is now cut in two. April 29, Northern Italy. General Heinrich von Vietinghoff, commanding German forces in Italy, signs an unconditional surrender. It will take effect on May 2nd. It's the first formal German surrender anywhere in Europe. The Italian campaign, which began with the invasion of Sicily in July 1943, is finally over. Nearly 2 years of brutal fighting through mountains and fortified lines. Almost 1 million Allied and German casualties. But southern Germany is now exposed, and the remaining German forces in Europe are completely isolated. The Reich is dying. All that remains is Berlin. April 1st, 1945, Moscow. Joseph Stalin summons his 2 most successful commanders to the Kremlin. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, defender of Moscow and Leningrad, conqueror of Berlin's approaches. Marshal Ivan Konev, who smashed through Poland and into Germany from the south. Stalin unfolds a map and looks at them with those cold, calculating eyes. So, who is going to take Berlin? He asks. We are, or are, the Allies going to get there first? The question is designed to provoke competition. Stalin knows exactly how to manipulate his generals. Zhukov will attack from the east, crossing the Oder River and assaulting the Silo Heights, the last major defensive position before Berlin. Konev will attack from the south, crossing the Neisse River. If Zhukov bogs down, Konev is authorized to swing north and take Berlin himself. The race is on. The forces assembled for the final battle are staggering. 2.5 million Soviet troops, 6,000 tanks and self-propelled guns, 40,000 artillery pieces, mortars and rocket launchers. Facing them, about 1 million German defenders. A hodgepodge force of regular army remnants, SS fanatics, Volkssturm militia made up of old men and teenage boys, and whatever units can be scraped together from the collapsing fronts. They're dug into defensive positions around and inside Berlin. They have limited ammunition, no air support, and no hope of reinforcement. But they're defending their capital, and many believe they're fighting for their family's survival. April 13th, extraordinary news reaches Hitler's bunker. President Franklin Roosevelt has died of a cerebral hemorrhage. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels is ecstatic. He calls Hitler immediately. "My Führer, I congratulate you," he shouts into the phone. "Roosevelt is dead. It's the miracle we've been waiting for." Goebbels sees parallels to 1762, when Frederick the Great was surrounded by enemies and facing certain defeat. Then the Russian Empress Elizabeth died. Her successor withdrew from the war. Prussia was saved. This is the turning point, Goebbels insists. The alliance will collapse. The Americans will make peace. It's delusional fantasy. Vice President Harry Truman is sworn in as president. US policy doesn't change at all. The alliance holds firm. But Goebbels and Hitler want so desperately to believe that they convince themselves the miracle is real. Reality will arrive in 3 days. April 16th, 1945, 5 a.m. Along the Oder River, 40 miles east of Berlin. Every Soviet gun opens fire simultaneously. The barrage is so intense that buildings in Berlin, 40 miles away, shake from the concussion. Windows rattle. People wake in terror. For 30 minutes, the bombardment continues. Shells fall at a rate of 1 every second along the entire front. Then, Zhukov orders a surprise. Giant searchlights snap on, 143 of them. The beams sweep across no man's land, aimed at the German positions to blind the defenders. Soviet infantry and tanks surge forward. But the Germans had anticipated the attack. They withdrew from their forward positions during the night. The artillery barrage hit empty ground. Now, as Soviet forces advance, they emerge from the smoke to find the Germans waiting on the Silo Heights, a steep escarpment rising out of the Oder Valley. German guns open fire from the high ground. The Soviets are advancing uphill, exposed, perfect targets. Zhukov's carefully planned assault turns into a bloodbath. He makes a desperate decision: throw in his tank reserves immediately, despite orders to hold them back until the infantry secured the heights. The tanks drive forward into a confined battlefield already jammed with infantry. The advance becomes a traffic jam, a killing ground. For 3 days, Soviet forces batter themselves against the Silo Heights. 30,000 Soviet soldiers die in the assault. But slowly, through sheer weight of numbers and firepower, they grind forward. Meanwhile, to the south, Konev is having better luck. His forces cross the Neisse River against lighter resistance. They advance faster than Zhukov, deeper into Germany. Stalin, delighted at the competition he's created, tells Konev he's authorized to swing north toward Berlin if Zhukov continues to bog down. The race intensifies. April 21st. Zhukov's forces finally break through the Silo Heights. They pour westward toward Berlin. The eastern suburbs come under artillery fire. April 25th. Soviet forces approaching from the north and south meet up west of Berlin. The city is surrounded. 2 million civilians are trapped inside. Most are women, children, and the elderly. The men are either dead, in the military, or already fled. The battle for Berlin begins. 50 feet below the Reich Chancellery Garden in central Berlin. The Führer bunker. 18 cramped rooms. Damp walls. Recycled air that smells of sweat and fear. This is where Adolf Hitler will spend his final days. He's 56 years old but looks 70. Stooped and shuffling. His left hand trembles constantly. His eyes are bloodshot and watery. 12 years of unlimited power and amphetamine injections have left him a physical wreck. But the man's will remains unbroken. Or perhaps unhinged is the better word. Hitler spends hours hunched over maps, moving phantom armies that no longer exist. Steiner's attack will save Berlin, he insists to his generals. Steiner will drive the Russians back. SS General Felix Steiner commands a unit that exists largely on paper. Maybe 20,000 men, most poorly armed. No tanks. No artillery. The generals try to explain this. Hitler screams at them, accuses them of treason, orders attacks by divisions that were destroyed weeks ago. April 20th, Hitler's 56th birthday. His last appearance above ground. He emerges into the Chancellery Garden to award medals to Hitler Youth soldiers, boys 12 to 16 years old who've been fighting Soviet tanks. The newsreel cameras record a shaking old man patting the cheeks of children. His smile is forced. His movements, mechanical. Most of his inner circle urges him to leave Berlin. Fly south to Bavaria. Continue the fight from the mountains. Hitler refuses. I stay in Berlin, he says. I fall here or win here. Goering flees south. Himmler begins secret peace negotiations with the Allies. Most of the Nazi leadership abandons the capital. but a core group remains in the bunker. Goebbels with his wife and 6 children. Martin Bormann, Hitler's secretary. A few generals. SS guards. Secretaries. And Eva Braun, Hitler's mistress of 16 years. Above the bunker, Berlin is being destroyed. Soviet forces fight their way into the city, street by street, building by building. German soldiers and Volkssturm militia fire from windows and rooftops. Soviet troops respond with tank fire and artillery at point-blank range. Entire blocks are reduced to rubble. Civilians huddle in cellars as the battle rages overhead. Some emerge waving white flags. Others are caught in crossfire. Soviet soldiers often don't distinguish between combatants and civilians. The revenge for what Germans did in Russia is comprehensive and brutal. April 30th, morning. Soviet troops assault the Reichstag, the German parliament building. To Stalin, it's the symbol of Nazi power. German defenders turn it into a fortress. Machine gun nests in every room, barricades in every hallway. The battle rages for hours. Room to room, floor to floor, hand to hand, fighting in stairwells. Finally, in the afternoon, Soviet soldiers reach the roof and raise the red flag on the dome. The moment is captured on film, though the actual flag raising will be restaged the next day for a better photograph. But by the time the flag goes up, Hitler is already dead. April 29, after midnight. In the bunker's small conference room, Hitler marries Eva Braun in a brief civil ceremony. A city official is found to perform the service. The vows are exchanged. They're now husband and wife. There's a small celebration afterward. Champagne. Some forced attempts at normal conversation. Then Hitler retires to another room to dictate his political testament. It's a document of breathtaking self-delusion. He blames the Jews for starting the war. He blames his generals for losing it. He blames the German people for not being worthy of him. He takes no responsibility for anything. He expels Goering and Himmler from the Nazi Party for treason. He appoints Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz as his successor. Then he goes to bed for the last time. April 30th, afternoon. Hitler emerges from his private quarters to say goodbye to his staff. He shakes hands mechanically. His eyes are dead. He and Eva Braun retire to their sitting room. She takes a cyanide capsule. He shoots himself in the head. It's approximately 3:30 p.m. SS guards wrap the bodies in blankets and carry them up to the Chancellery Garden. Shells are still falling. Explosions rock the city. They place the bodies in a shell crater, douse them with gasoline, and light them on fire. The cremation is hasty and incomplete. Soviet artillery is too close for them to stay long. The bodies are buried in the crater. Later, Soviet troops will find them, though it will take months to conclusively identify Hitler's remains through dental records. The man who started a war that killed 60 million people is dead. But the dying isn't over. May 1st, evening. Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister who orchestrated the Nazi rise to power and sustained Hitler's myth until the very end, makes his final decision. His wife Magda gives their 6 children, ages 4 to 12, morphine injections. Then, one by one, she crushes cyanide capsules into their mouths. All 6 die in their beds. Goebbels and Magda then go up to the garden. An SS guard shoots them both. Martin Bormann attempts to escape through Soviet lines that night. He's never seen again. His body will be found decades later. He died in the attempt, probably from cyanide. May 2nd, morning. General Helmuth Weidling, commander of Berlin's defense, orders a ceasefire. All fighting in the city stops by afternoon. Soviet soldiers emerge from buildings, exhausted, covered in dust and blood. German soldiers emerge from cellars with their hands up. Berlin has fallen. The capital of the 1,000-year Reich that lasted 12 years is now a field of rubble. May 2nd, 1945. Hitler is dead. Berlin has fallen. But Germany hasn't surrendered. Admiral Karl Dönitz, now the Führer's designated successor, sets up a government in Flensburg in northern Germany. He tries to play for time. His strategy: surrender to the Western Allies, but keep fighting the Soviets. Allow as many German soldiers and civilians as possible to flee west. It won't work. May 4th. Montgomery's headquarters at Lüneburg Heath. German officers arrive to negotiate. They offer to surrender all German forces in northern Germany, Holland, and Denmark, but only to the British. Montgomery refuses. "I don't have authority to accept surrender on behalf of the Americans or Russians," he tells them. "Only troops fighting against me." Dönitz has no choice. The surrender is signed. German forces in the north lay down their arms. May 6th. Eisenhower's headquarters in Reims, France. A larger German delegation arrives, led by Admiral Hans-Georg von Friedeberg. Again, they try to surrender only to the Western Allies. Eisenhower's response is blunt and final. Only unconditional surrender of all German forces on all fronts. "If you don't sign, I'll close the Western Front and let the Russians take all of Germany." Dönitz realizes the game is over. May 7th, 2:41 a.m. General Alfred Jodl, Hitler's chief of operations throughout the war, signs the unconditional surrender. For the Western Allies, General Walter Bedell Smith, Eisenhower's chief of staff. For the Soviet Union, General Ivan Susloporov. All German armed forces will cease operations by 11:01 p.m. on May 8th. But Stalin is furious. Germany surrenders in France. The country that suffered 27 million dead doesn't get to host the surrender ceremony. This is unacceptable, Stalin rages. The surrender must be in Berlin, where German fascism was born. Suzlo-Parov acted without authorization. Stalin demands a second ceremony. May 8th, 11 p.m., Karlshorst suburb of Berlin. Soviet military headquarters. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the Wehrmacht High Command throughout the entire war, arrives in full uniform to sign for Germany. He looks around the room at the Allied officers, and his face shows barely concealed contempt. Marshal Georgy Zhukov signs for the Soviet Union. Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder signs for the Western Allies. The surrender is complete. May 8th, 1945. V-Day, victory in Europe. In London, crowds flood Trafalgar Square and Buckingham Palace. Churchill appears on the balcony to cheering thousands. In New York, Times Square is packed with celebrating Americans. Confetti falls like snow. Strangers kiss in the streets. In Paris, the Champs-Élysées fills with jubilant crowds. The nightmare of occupation is finally over. In Moscow, Red Square erupts in celebration. Fireworks light the sky. Stalin addresses the nation. The war in Europe is over. But the celebrating is muted by an understanding of what's been lost. 40 million dead in Europe alone. The Soviet Union, 27 million. Poland, 6 million. Germany, 7 million. Yugoslavia, Hungary, Romania, France, Britain, every nation has bled. Entire cities erased from existence. Families destroyed. A generation of young men dead. And the revelation of the concentration camps has shocked the world into a new understanding of human evil. Germany is divided into 4 occupation zones: Soviet, American, British, French. Berlin itself, though deep inside the Soviet zone, is also split 4 ways. The Nazi leadership will stand trial at Nuremberg for crimes against humanity. Europe is free, but it's a continent in ruins. And in the Pacific, Japan is still fighting. The world's most terrible war is only half over. Spring 1943. While Allied forces prepare to invade Europe, on the other side of the world, America faces a different challenge entirely. How to defeat Japan? The Japanese Empire at its height stretches across the Pacific and Southeast Asia. From the borders of India to the mid-Pacific Islands, from the Aleutians in the north to Indonesia in the south. It's the largest empire in Asian history. Is less than Hashone. 0 hash is greater than. And every island, every beach, every jungle path is defended by soldiers who believe surrender is the ultimate dishonor. 2 American commanders proposed 2 very different strategies. General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander in the Southwest Pacific, favors a land-based approach. Fight through the Solomon Islands, then New Guinea, then the Philippines. Island by island, base by base. Create a barrier cutting Japan off from its conquered territories in Southeast Asia. It's also personal. In 1942, MacArthur was forced to flee the Philippines as Japanese forces overran the islands. He made a promise when he left. I shall return. The US Navy has a different idea. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of Pacific Fleet, proposes island hopping across the Central Pacific. Bypass heavily defended positions. Seize smaller islands as air and naval bases. Use those bases to attack Japan's supply lines directly. It would be faster, cheaper in lives, more efficient. The debate reaches Washington. The decision: do both. June 1943, Operation Cartwheel begins. MacArthur's forces start the long grind through the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. It's some of the worst terrain on Earth. Dense jungle where you can't see 20 feet ahead. Mountains covered in vegetation. Rivers infested with crocodiles. Tropical diseases that kill as many men as Japanese bullets is less than #3. 0 is greater than malaria, dysentery, dengue fever, jungle rot. Soldiers' boots fall apart in the mud. Wounds become infected within hours. And the Japanese fight from prepared positions, perfectly camouflaged, waiting in silence until Americans walk into kill zones. It takes 9 months to fight through to Rabaul, the major Japanese base in the region. 9 months of grinding jungle warfare. When they finally arrive, MacArthur does something unexpected. He bypasses it. Leaves 30,000 Japanese troops isolated on Rabaul with no supplies, no reinforcements. They'll stay there, growing vegetables and slowly starving until the war ends. It's the first major use of a strategy that will define the Pacific War. Bypass, isolate, move on. Meanwhile, Nimitz begins his Central Pacific campaign. November 23, 1943. The target, Tarawa Atoll, in the Gilbert Islands. A coral reef barely 10 feet above sea level, 2 miles long, defended by 4,800 Japanese troops. American planners think it will fall in a few hours. They're catastrophically wrong. The assault begins at dawn. But reconnaissance missed something crucial. The tide is lower than expected. The water over the reef is too shallow for landing craft. The boats hit the reef 500 yards from shore and stop. Marines have to climb out and wade through chest-deep water. Weighed down with equipment. Moving slowly. Perfect targets. Japanese machine guns open fire from concrete and coral bunkers. The water turns red. Bodies float in the lagoon. Those who reach the beach find no cover except a low seawall. They're pinned down by fire from positions they can't even see. For 76 hours, the Marines fight to take an island 2 miles long. They clear the Japanese bunkers one by one with flamethrowers, grenades, and satchel charges. Often, the only way to kill the defenders is to pour gasoline into the bunker ventilation shafts and light it. November 26, Tarawa is secured. Of 4,800 Japanese defenders, only 17 are captured alive. 1,600 Americans are dead. 2,000 wounded. For an island 2 miles long. Admiral Nimitz looks at the casualty figures and realizes the Pacific War is going to be even bloodier than anyone imagined. But the Navy has learned crucial lessons. Longer preliminary bombardments, better reconnaissance of landing conditions, specialized equipment for beach assaults. Next time will be better. January through February 1944. The Marshall Islands. This time, the Navy applies the lessons from Tarawa. Kwajalein, Roy, Namur, Eniwetok. Each island receives days of bombardment before Marines land. The results are dramatically better. Islands fall with far fewer casualties. And the Navy begins bypassing heavily defended positions. The major Japanese base at Truk, once called the Gibraltar of the Pacific, is simply left to rot. Cut off from supplies, neutralized by air power, ignored. By spring 1944, American forces are positioned for the next leap westward. The Mariana Islands. June 19, 1944. American forces are invading Saipan in the Marianas. If they succeed, US B-29 bombers will be within range of Japan itself. The Japanese Navy knows this. They send their carrier fleet to stop the invasion. What follows becomes known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The Japanese launch wave after wave of aircraft against the US fleet. But American radar sees them coming from 75 miles away. US fighters are scrambled in time. Hellcats and Corsairs climb to intercept. The slaughter is one-sided. Japanese pilots are novices. Most of their experienced airmen died in previous battles. American pilots are veterans with hundreds of hours of combat experience. US fighters shoot down Japanese planes in ratios of 10 to 1, 15 to 1. By the end of the day, Japan has lost over 300 aircraft. 3 carriers are sunk, 2 by American submarines, 1 by air attack. The Japanese carrier fleet as an effective fighting force ceases to exist. From this point forward, American ships and aircraft will operate in the Pacific virtually unopposed. July through August, the Americans capture Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. The fighting is savage. Japanese troops launch suicidal banzai charges. Thousands die in human wave attacks that achieve nothing except their own deaths. On Saipan, as the battle is clearly lost, something horrific happens. Marpi Point, the northern cliffs of Saipan. Japanese soldiers and civilians gather at the cliff edge. Below them, jagged rocks and crashing surf. American troops watch in horror as families jump. Parents throw their children off the cliff, then jump themselves. Soldiers detonate grenades against their chests. Men and women hold hands and leap together. Thousands die this way. American soldiers shout through loudspeakers, begging them to stop. Some try to physically restrain people from jumping. It makes no difference. Japanese propaganda has convinced civilians that Americans will torture and murder them. Death is preferable to capture. It's a glimpse into the fanaticism the Americans will face if they ever invade Japan itself. But the strategic victory is undeniable. American engineers immediately begin building massive airfields on Tinian and Saipan. Within months, hundreds of B-29 superfortresses will be based here. Japan's home islands are now within bombing range. The noose is tightening. July 1944, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. President Franklin Roosevelt meets with his Pacific commanders to make a decision that will cost hundreds of thousands of lives. The question, what's the next target after the Marianas? The Navy wants to bypass the Philippines entirely. Strike Taiwan or the Ryukyu Islands instead. Closer to Japan. Shorter supply lines. More strategically valuable. But Douglas MacArthur argues passionately for the Philippines. We have a moral obligation to liberate the Filipino people, he insists. America's honor demands it. There's truth in this. The Philippines had been an American territory. 17 million Filipinos suffered under brutal Japanese occupation. But there's also MacArthur's ego. His promise to return. His need to redeem his earlier defeat. Roosevelt, facing a presidential election in November, sides with MacArthur. The Philippines it is. October 20th, 1944. The island of Leyte in the central Philippines. The first major landing in MacArthur's return. Initial resistance is light. The beach is secured quickly. Then MacArthur himself wades ashore. It's carefully staged for photographers and newsreel cameras. MacArthur, in khakis and sunglasses, striding through knee-deep water with perfect posture. He reaches a microphone on the beach and broadcasts to the Filipino people. People of the Philippines, I have returned. It's one of the great propaganda moments of the war. It's also characteristic MacArthur, more theatre than military necessity. But the Japanese have no intention of letting the Philippines go without a fight. October 23rd through 26th, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The largest naval battle in history. The Japanese Navy commits everything it has left in a desperate, complex operation to destroy the American landing fleet. Operation Shogo, Victory Operation. Three Japanese forces converge on Leyte from different directions. It's confusing, ambitious, and nearly works. The center force, including the super battleship Musashi, sister ship of the Yamato, approaches through the Sibeриan Sea. American carrier aircraft swarm it. For hours, they hammer the Musashi with bombs and torpedoes. 17 bomb hits. 19 torpedo hits. The massive ship refuses to sink. Finally, in the late afternoon, the Musashi rolls over and goes down, taking over 1,000 sailors with her. The southern force is destroyed in a night battle in Surigao Strait. American battleships, many of them survivors of Pearl Harbor, finally get their revenge, crossing the T and annihilating the Japanese force. But the northern force achieves its objective. It's a decoy, 4 Japanese carriers with almost no aircraft aboard. Their job is to lure the main American carrier force away from the landing beaches. Admiral William Halsey, commanding the US carriers, takes the bait. He races north, chasing the Japanese carriers, taking America's main striking force with him, which leaves the landing beaches exposed. October 25th, morning. Off the coast of Samar Island. The Japanese center force, having survived the air attacks, breaks through to the landing area. Facing them, a handful of small escort carriers and destroyers. Tiny ships designed to escort convoys, not fight battleships. The Japanese have 4 battleships, including the Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. 6 heavy cruisers. Multiple destroyers. It should be a massacre. But the American destroyers do something extraordinary. They charge. Tiny destroyers, making suicide runs against ships 10 times their size. Firing torpedoes at point-blank range, drawing fire away from the carriers. The destroyer USS Johnston closes to within 5 miles of the Japanese battleships and fires every torpedo it has. Then continues firing its 5-inch guns at ships with 18-inch armor. It's like attacking a tank with a pistol. But it's working. The Japanese commander, Admiral Takeo Kurita, becomes convinced he's stumbled into Halsey's main fleet. The ferocity of the American defense makes him think there must be major ships nearby. He orders a retreat. The landing area is saved. But the American destroyers paid a terrible price. 3 sunk, others badly damaged. On the Johnston, as the ship is sinking, Japanese destroyers pass close by. Sailors on the Japanese ships line the rails and salute the American survivors in the water. A warrior's tribute to courage. But October 25th also brings something new and terrible to the Pacific War. The first organized kamikaze attack. Japanese pilots deliberately crash their explosive-laden aircraft into American ships. The escort carrier USS Street Low is hit by a kamikaze and sinks. Other ships are damaged. Hundreds of American sailors die. It's the official beginning of the Divine Wind, the kamikazes. For the rest of the war, suicide attacks will be a major weapon in Japan's arsenal. Better to die taking the enemy with you than surrender. The Battle of Leyte Gulf ends with the destruction of Japanese naval power. 4 carriers sunk, 3 battleships destroyed, 6 heavy cruisers lost. Japan's navy will never again be a significant threat. But the cost for the Philippines will be catastrophic. The land campaign for Leyte takes over 2 months. Japanese forces fight from prepared positions in the mountains and jungles. They don't retreat, they don't surrender, they simply fight until killed. 70,000 Japanese soldiers die on Leyte. 15,000 Americans are killed or wounded. January 9th, 1945. The main prize, Luzon, the largest Philippine island, home to Manila, the capital. American forces land at Lingayen Gulf and push toward Manila. The Japanese commander, General Tomoyuki Yamashita, the Tiger of Malaya, has ordered his troops not to defend Manila. Preserve the city. Fight from the mountains instead. But the junior commander in Manila, Rear Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi, refuses to obey. He orders his 20,000 naval troops to fight to the death in the city. February 3rd, American forces enter Manila. What follows is a month of urban warfare that destroys one of Asia's most beautiful cities. Japanese troops fortify buildings and fight from the rubble. American artillery and tank fire reduce entire blocks to ruins. But the worst horror is what the Japanese do to civilians. As American forces close in, Japanese troops go on a rampage. Mass executions of Filipino civilians, bayoneting of children, rape and murder on a systematic scale. Entire families are machine-gunned in their homes. Hospitals are burned with patients inside. Churches full of refugees are set on fire. 100,000 Filipino civilians are murdered in the final days of the Battle of Manila. It's one of the worst urban atrocities of World War II. April 13th, the last Japanese stronghold in Manila Bay. Fort Drum, a small island fortified with thick concrete, nicknamed the Concrete Battleship. American forces can't take it by conventional assault, so they try something else. They pump thousands of gallons of diesel fuel into the fort's ventilation system, then ignite it with thermite grenades. The explosion is apocalyptic. Every Japanese soldier inside dies instantly. The fort becomes a crematorium. By late April, the Philippines are secure. The cost: 70,000 Japanese soldiers dead, 16,000 Americans killed or wounded, 100,000 Filipino civilians murdered. And many historians will argue the entire campaign was unnecessary. American submarines had already cut Japan's supply lines from Southeast Asia. The Philippines could have been bypassed, isolated, left to wither. But MacArthur kept his promise. He returned. at a cost of nearly 200,000 lives. While the great battles rage across Pacific Islands, another campaign unfolds silently beneath the waves. The submarine war against Japan. It's the campaign that will truly bring Japan to its knees. American submarines patrol the shipping lanes between Japan and its conquered territories. Their targets: merchant ships carrying oil from the Dutch East Indies, rubber from Malaya, rice from Indochina, iron from China. Japan is an island nation. It imports virtually everything it needs to wage war. Cut those imports, and the war machine grinds to a halt. The Japanese make critical mistakes that help the Americans. Unlike Germany in the Atlantic, Japan doesn't organize merchant ships into convoys until far too late. Ships sail alone or in small groups, easy prey for submarines. Japan doesn't build enough escort destroyers, doesn't prioritize anti-submarine warfare, focuses on offensive operations instead of protecting supply lines. It's a strategic blunder that will prove fatal. By late 1944, American submarines are running out of targets. They've sunk 70% of Japan's merchant fleet. The rest huddle in ports, afraid to sail. Oil tankers are priority targets. Without oil from Borneo and Sumatra, Japan's navy can't sail, its aircraft can't fly, its factories can't produce. By early 1945, oil imports to Japan have been reduced to a trickle. Training for kamikaze pilots is reduced because there isn't enough fuel. Ships are ordered to conserve fuel by avoiding unnecessary movements. Factories slow production. Japan is being strangled. The irony is brutal. Japan conquered an empire to secure resources. But now, it can't get those resources back to Japan. The empire has become a liability. American submarines accomplish what German U-boats never could in the Atlantic. They bring an island nation to the edge of starvation and collapse. Yet despite this, despite losing every major battle, despite being cut off from resources, Japan refuses to surrender. The military government in Tokyo prepares for a final battle. One last stand on Japanese soil, sacrificing the entire population if necessary to avoid the shame of surrender. Which means America faces a terrible question. How do you force Japan to give up without invading the home islands? First, America needs bases even closer to Japan. February 19th, 1945, dawn. 800 miles south of Tokyo. A tiny volcanic island, barely 8 square miles in size. Iwo Jima. From the deck of the USS El Dorado, Marine commanders look through binoculars at a bleak landscape. Black volcanic sand. No vegetation. In the south, Mount Suribachi, a 550-foot extinct volcano. It looks dead, lifeless, barren. It's actually one of the most heavily fortified pieces of ground on Earth. For 6 months, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi and 22,000 Japanese soldiers have been preparing. 11 miles of tunnels, caves, underground barracks, artillery positions hidden in concrete bunkers. Kuribayashi studied in America, served as a military attaché in Washington. He knows American firepower. He knows his men can't win. But he can make the Americans pay. His orders to his troops are simple and brutal. Every man will kill 10 Americans before dying. Do not die uselessly. Hold fire until the beaches are full of enemy troops. For 3 days before the landing, American battleships and aircraft pound Iwo Jima. 6,800 tons of shells. Thousands of bombs. The island disappears beneath smoke and flame. Surely nothing could survive that. 9 a.m., February 19th. The first wave of Marines hits the beach. For the first few minutes, silence. Marines climb out of landing craft and wade onto black volcanic sand. It's soft, loose, hard to run in. Men sink to their ankles with every step. Still no shooting. Then the island explodes with fire. Machine guns positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. Mortars pre-sighted on the beach. Artillery emerging from hidden bunkers to fire and then disappearing again. Kuribayashi waited until the beach was packed with men and equipment. Now he's unleashing hell. Marines are cut down in waves. Landing craft are hit by artillery shells and explode. The black sand turns red. But the Marines keep coming. Wave after wave. They take horrific casualties, but slowly push inland. By nightfall, 30,000 Marines are ashore. They've advanced barely 1,000 yards. Casualties are already in the thousands. And the real fighting hasn't even begun. The immediate objective, Mount Suribachi. The volcano dominates the island. Japanese artillery spotters on top can direct fire on every square foot of beach. Marines begin fighting their way up the steep, barren slopes. Every cave must be cleared. Flamethrowers shoot burning fuel into openings. Grenades are thrown into bunkers. Satchel charges blow up fortified positions. The Japanese fight from spider holes, individual fighting positions covered with wood and sand. Invisible until a Marine steps on one. Then a soldier pops up and fires. Progress is measured in yards per day. February 23rd, 10th day of the battle. A 40-man patrol from the 28th Marines begins the final climb to Suribachi's summit. They're carrying a small American flag and a length of pipe. 10:30 a.m. They reach the top. The flag goes up. On the beaches below, exhausted Marines look up and see it. Cheers erupt. Ships in the harbour sound their horns. Staff Sergeant Louis Lowry captures the moment with his camera. 3 hours later, a larger flag is brought up, more visible from the beaches. Joe Rosenthal, an Associated Press photographer, captures 6 men raising it. That photograph will become the most famous image of the Pacific War. Of the 6 men in the picture, 3 will die on Iwo Jima before the battle ends. But taking Suribachi is just the beginning. The rest of the island, a plateau honeycombed with tunnels and fortifications, will take 5 more weeks of savage fighting. Every single Japanese position must be destroyed individually. There's no other way. Flamethrower teams advance under covering fire. Spray burning fuel into cave openings. Engineers pack explosives into tunnel entrances and blow them shut. The Japanese never surrender. They fight until killed. Some wait in caves until Marines pass, then emerge to attack from behind. March 26, 36 days after the landing. The island is declared secure. Final count: of 22,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 are captured. 98.9% died rather than surrender. American casualties: 6,821 killed. 19,217 wounded. 27 Medals of Honor are awarded, more than any other single battle in American history. Admiral Chester Nimitz says of the Marines at Iwo Jima, uncommon valor was a common virtue. But was it worth it? Over the next 5 months, more than 2,500 B-29 bombers will make emergency landings on Iwo Jima. Damaged aircraft limping back from raids on Japan. Out of fuel. Engines failing. Wounded crews aboard. Without Iwo Jima, they would have crashed in the ocean. With it, they have a place to land. Estimated aircrew lives saved: 24,000. The math is brutal but clear. 7,000 Americans died to save 24,000. But Iwo Jima also shows what invading Japan itself will cost. If this is the price for 8 square miles, what will it cost to take the home islands? April 1st, 1945. Easter Sunday. April Fool's Day. The largest amphibious operation of the Pacific War is about to begin. Okinawa. 60 miles long, 350 miles from Japan's main islands. Large enough for massive air bases. The obvious staging point for the invasion of Japan itself. 1,300 ships. 54,000 troops in the first wave. 183,000 total. And defending Okinawa, 120,000 Japanese soldiers under General Mitsuru Ushijima. His strategy is different from previous battles. He's not trying to win. He's trying to make the Americans suffer so much they'll negotiate rather than invade Japan. Make them bleed. 9 a.m. The first Marines hit the beaches. They brace for the usual hell of fire. Instead, silence. No machine guns. No mortars. No artillery. Marines look at each other in confusion. Is this a trick? They advance inland cautiously. Still no resistance. By the end of the first day, 60,000 troops are ashore. They've captured 2 airfields. Total casualties, 28 killed, 100 wounded. It seems too good to be true. It is. Ushijima has withdrawn his forces to the south. To the Shuri Line, a series of ridges and fortifications across the narrow southern neck of the island. He's dug his troops into caves, tunnels, reverse slope positions. Places where American naval and air bombardment can't reach them. And he's waiting. But Ushijima has another weapon. April 6th and 7th, Operation Kikusui. Floating Chrysanthemum. 700 Japanese aircraft attack the invasion fleet. 355 are kamikazes, pilots who will never return. They come in waves. Zeros, Vals, Oscars, every type of plane Japan has left. Some are old training aircraft barely able to fly. Others are modern fighters. But they all have one purpose: hit an American ship and detonate. US radar picks them up 70 miles out. Combat air patrol fighters scramble to intercept. Anti-aircraft guns fill the sky with tracers and explosions. Many kamikazes are shot down, but many get through. The destroyer USS Bush is hit by 3 kamikazes in succession. She sinks with heavy loss of life. The destroyer Colhoun is hit and abandoned. Over the next 3 months, there will be 10 major kamikaze operations against the Okinawa fleet. 1,900 kamikaze sorties in total. 36 American ships sunk. 368 damaged. Nearly 5,000 American sailors killed, more than all the Marines who died taking Iwo Jima. It's the costliest naval campaign in American history. The Japanese also unveil the Oka cherry blossom, a rocket-powered piloted missile carrying 2,650 pounds of explosives, launched from a bomber and flown by a kamikaze pilot into the target. It's designed for one-way trips. But American fighters quickly learn to shoot down the bombers before they can launch the Okas. Few reach their targets. April 7th, the Japanese Navy's final sortie. The battleship Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, leaves port with 8 destroyers. It's a suicide mission. The Yamato has just enough fuel to reach Okinawa, but not enough to return. Orders: beach the ship and use it as an unsinkable gun platform. Fight until destroyed. American submarines spot the task force immediately. Radio the location to carriers. 2 p.m., 400 American aircraft attack. For 2 hours, the aircraft swarm over the Yamato. Torpedo after torpedo slams into the massive hull. Bombs penetrate the deck. Fires rage out of control. 3 p.m., the Yamato's magazines explode. The fireball is visible from 100 miles away. The shock wave knocks aircraft out of the sky. A mushroom cloud rises thousands of feet. 2,700 Japanese sailors die. The Imperial Japanese Navy ceases to exist. On Okinawa, the land battle has become a nightmare. April rains turn the battlefield into a swamp. Men wade through knee-deep mud. Tanks bog down. Supplies can barely move forward. And the Japanese are fighting from caves and bunkers carved into the limestone ridges. Every position has to be taken by infantry assault. Flamethrowers, grenades, satchel charges. The same brutal close-quarters combat as Iwo Jima. Progress is measured in yards per day. May 11th, the Americans launch a major offensive to break the Shuri line. For 10 days, they batter themselves against Japanese defenses. Casualties mount into the thousands. June 1st, Shuri Castle falls. The Japanese defensive line finally cracks. Ushijima's forces begin withdrawing to the southern tip of the island. June 4th, Marines land behind Japanese lines on the southern coast. The Japanese are now trapped. June 22nd, 82 days after the landing. The island is declared secure. General Ushijima commits seppuku, ritual suicide, in a cave overlooking the ocean. The casualties are staggering. Japanese military, over 100,000 killed. Okinawan civilians, 40,000 to 150,000 killed. Many forced into suicide by Japanese troops. Others caught in the crossfire. American ground forces, 12,520 killed. 38,000 wounded. American naval forces, 4,900 killed from kamikaze attacks. Total American casualties, over 50,000. And for the first time in the Pacific War, large numbers of Japanese soldiers surrender. 7,000 taken prisoner. Unheard of in previous battles where surrender meant dishonor worse than death. Maybe, Japan's will to fight is finally cracking. But American planners look at the casualty figures and calculate what invading Japan itself will cost. If Okinawa cost 50,000 American casualties, the home islands could cost 500,000. Maybe more. The Japanese military is preparing the entire population for a final stand. Women are training with sharpened bamboo spears. Children are being taught to strap explosives to their bodies and throw themselves under tanks. 100 million Japanese prepared to die for the emperor. America needs another way. Summer 1944. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress enters service. The most advanced bomber in the world. It can carry 20,000 pounds of bombs, fly 3,200 miles, operate at altitudes German and Japanese fighters struggle to reach. For the first time, the Japanese home islands are within range of American strategic bombing. The first B-29s fly from bases in China. But China is too far from Japan. The bombers are operating at the absolute limit of their range. June 15, 1944. The first raid on Japan from China bases. Target: steel works in Kyushu. It's largely ineffective. The B-29s are bombing from high altitude, 20,000 feet or higher, to stay safe from anti-aircraft fire. But at that altitude, cloud cover obscures targets. The jet stream throws off bomb aiming. Most bombs miss their targets entirely. After months of raids, damage to Japanese industry is minimal. November 1944. Everything changes. The Marianas have been captured. Massive airfields are completed on Saipan and Tinian. Now, Japan is only 1,500 miles away, well within B-29 range. November 24. The first raid from the Marianas. 111 B-29s attack the Nakajima aircraft factory near Tokyo. Again, results are disappointing. High-altitude precision bombing isn't working. January 1945, Major General Curtis LeMay takes command of the 21st Bomber Command. LeMay is ruthless, calculating, willing to try anything that works. He looks at the failed high-altitude campaign and makes a radical decision. Stop trying to hit specific factories. Instead, burn entire cities. The revelation comes from a test. Japanese cities aren't made of stone and steel like American or European cities. They're made of wood and paper, packed densely together. Perfect fuel for fire. LeMay orders a switch to incendiary bombs and low-altitude night attacks. Flying low means better accuracy, heavier bomb loads, and, counterintuitively, possibly fewer losses. Japanese fighters aren't trained for night combat. Most anti-aircraft guns are positioned for high-altitude defense. March 9, 1945. LeMay is ready to test his theory. Target: Tokyo. 7 p.m. Pathfinder aircraft drop incendiary markers on Tokyo's industrial districts. The fires they start will guide the main force. Midnight. 334 B-29s arrive over Tokyo. Flying at 5,000 to 7,000 feet. Low enough to see the ground. Low enough to aim precisely. They drop 2,000 tons of incendiary bombs. The bombs are clusters of small incendiaries, each one designed to stick to whatever it hits and burn at 1,800 degrees. Within minutes, thousands of individual fires merge into a firestorm. The heat is so intense it creates its own weather. Winds rush inward to feed the flames. Hurricane-force winds that knock people off their feet. Winds so strong they pull people into the flames. The temperature at ground level reaches 1800 degrees. People running from the fire are overtaken and incinerated. Those who jump into canals to escape are boiled alive. Those who hide in shelters suffocate as the fire consumes all oxygen. The bomber crews flying overhead can smell burning flesh at 5,000 feet. Some are physically sick. Others can't speak. All are shocked by what they've created. When dawn breaks, 16 square miles of Tokyo have been incinerated. Over 100,000 people are dead. More than died at Hiroshima. 1 million are homeless. It's the deadliest air raid in history. And it's just the beginning. March 11th and 12th, Nagoya. March 13th and 14th, Osaka. March 16th and 17th, Kobe. City after city burns. By summer, the major industrial cities have been largely destroyed. LeMay moves on to secondary targets, then tertiary targets. Eventually, 67 Japanese cities are firebombed. 40% of Japan's urban areas destroyed. Millions are homeless. Hundreds of thousands dead. After Iwo Jima falls in March, P-51 Mustang fighters can escort the bombers all the way to Japan and back. B-29 losses drop dramatically. By July 1945, American bombers roam over Japan virtually unopposed. The cities are burning. The people are starving. The economy is collapsing. Yet Japan's military government refuses to surrender. They're preparing Operation Ketsugo, the defense of the homeland. 28 million civilians being trained to fight. Women with bamboo spears. Children with explosives. Every beach fortified. Every city a battlefield. The military is preparing to sacrifice the entire nation rather than accept defeat. Conventional bombing isn't going to break Japan's will. Strategic bombing has failed. Submarine warfare has isolated Japan, but still they won't surrender. An invasion seems inevitable. Unless America can find a weapon so terrible, so shocking, that even Japan's fanatic military leadership will have no choice but to give up. That weapon is being prepared in the New Mexico desert. While the island battles dominate headlines, another campaign unfolds in the jungles and mountains of Southeast Asia. Burma. 1942, Japan invaded Burma and cut the Burma Road, the vital supply route to nationalist China. For 3 years, Allied forces have been fighting to reopen it. The first British counterattack in late 42 was crushed. The second attempt in 43 using Brigadier Order Wingate's Chindits, special forces operating behind Japanese lines, cost a third of the force. But by October 1943, the Allies are ready to try again. US General Joseph Stilwell, Vinegar Joe, leads Chinese forces trained and equipped by Americans. They're reinforced by Merrill's Marauders, an elite American jungle fighting unit. They cross into northern Burma and begin the long push south. The terrain is nightmarish. Dense jungle, where visibility is measured in feet. Mountains rising 7,000 feet. Rivers that turn into torrents during monsoon season. And everywhere, Japanese soldiers in prepared positions, waiting in ambush. March 1944. Japan launches a desperate counterattack. They invade India, trying to disrupt Allied preparations and seize supply bases. The towns of Kohima and Imphal are besieged. For 2 weeks, British and Indian forces hold out, supplied entirely by air. The Japanese attacks are ferocious, suicidal. But they fail. When the siege is finally lifted, 65,000 Japanese soldiers are dead or dying. It's a blow from which Japan's Burma forces never recover. May 1944, Stilwell's forces reach Myit Kina, the crucial crossroads town in northern Burma. The battle lasts 3 months. House-to-house fighting in monsoon rains that turn streets into rivers. Finally, in August, Myit Kina falls. The Burma Road is open again. Supplies can flow to China. March 1945. British General William Slim's 14th Army launches the final offensive. They capture Mandalay after bitter fighting, then push south through central Burma toward the capital, Rangoon. The Japanese are retreating on all fronts now. Their supply lines are cut. Disease and starvation kill as many as Allied bullets. May 3, 1945, Allied forces enter Rangoon. The city is empty. The Japanese evacuated rather than be trapped. The Burma campaign is over. It's often called the Forgotten War. While Europe celebrated VE Day and the Pacific saw dramatic island battles, men died in Burma's jungles with little recognition. But the campaign mattered. 65,000 Japanese casualties weakened their overall position. The reopened Burma Road kept China in the war, and the defeat in India ended any Japanese threat to the subcontinent. The next target would have been Malaya, a campaign to liberate Singapore and the Dutch East Indies. But events in the Pacific will make that unnecessary. In the New Mexico desert, scientists are about to change warfare forever. 1939, a letter arrives at the White House. It's from Albert Einstein, the world's most famous scientist, warning President Roosevelt that Germany might be developing an atomic bomb. If true, it would give Hitler a weapon of unimaginable power. 1942. The Manhattan Project officially begins. a secret program to build an atomic bomb before Germany does. Eventually, it will employ 130,000 people. Cost $2 billion, equivalent to 30 billion today. Most workers have no idea what they're building. 3 main sites. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, uranium-235 enrichment. Separating the rare, fissionable isotope from common uranium-238. It's slow, expensive, requires massive facilities. But uranium-235 is what makes an atomic bomb possible. Hanford, Washington, plutonium production. Plutonium-239 doesn't exist in nature. It's created in nuclear reactors. The world's first reactors are built here to produce it. Los Alamos, New Mexico, design and assembly. A secret laboratory on an isolated mesa 7,300 feet above sea level, where the brilliant and the strange gather to turn theory into a weapon. Leading the scientific effort, J. Robert Oppenheimer. 40 years old. A theoretical physicist from Berkeley. Chainsmoker, rail-thin, intense. He recruits the best minds in physics. Many are refugees from Nazi Europe, Jews who fled Hitler's regime, now building a weapon to stop him. The military director, General Leslie Groves. An army engineer who just finished building the Pentagon. Gruff, demanding, obsessed with security. Oppenheimer and Groves shouldn't work together. The scientist and the general, but somehow they do. 2 bomb designs emerge. Little Boy, the uranium bomb. Gun-type design, fire one piece of uranium-235 into another. Create a critical mass. Boom. It's simple in concept. The scientists are confident it will work. No test needed. But it requires enormous amounts of uranium-235. The Oak Ridge facilities can barely produce enough for 1 bomb. Fat Man, the plutonium bomb. Implosion design. Surround a plutonium core with conventional explosives. Detonate them simultaneously. The shock wave compresses the plutonium to critical mass. It's complex, uncertain, never been tried. This one needs to be tested. July 16th, 1945, 5:29 a.m. Alamogordo, New Mexico. The Jornada del Muerto Desert, the journey of the dead man. A 100-foot steel tower holds the Gadget, the first atomic bomb. Scientists and military observers wait in bunkers 10 miles away. 5:29 a.m. Light brighter than 1,000 suns. A fireball that vaporizes the steel tower. Sand beneath the explosion turns to glass. A mushroom cloud rises 7.5 miles into the sky. The shockwave is felt 120 miles away. Windows shatter in towns across New Mexico. Oppenheimer watches and recalls a line from Hindu scripture. Now I am become death, the the destroyer of worlds. One scientist says, "We are all sons of bitches now." The atomic age has begun. News is immediately sent to President Harry Truman. He's at the Potsdam Conference outside Berlin, meeting with Stalin and Churchill to discuss post-war Europe. Truman casually mentions to Stalin that America has a new weapon of unusual destructive force. Stalin seems unimpressed, says he hopes America will use it against Japan. What Truman doesn't know, Soviet spies have been embedded in the Manhattan Project for years. Stalin knows about the atomic bomb. He's already ordered Soviet scientists to build one. Late July, 2 bombs are prepared. Little Boy, the uranium bomb. Fat Man, the plutonium bomb. They're transported to Tinian Island in the Marianas. A 3rd plutonium core is in production. It will be ready by August 19th if needed. Target Selection Committee meets. Criteria: the target must be militarily and industrially significant. It must be largely undamaged by conventional bombing, so the atomic bomb's effects can be measured. And it must be large enough to contain the blast. Final candidates: Hiroshima, Kokura, Nagasaki, Niigata. There's no debate at the highest levels about whether to use the bomb. After Okinawa's 50,000 casualties, after projections of 500,000 dead in an invasion, the decision is obvious. Use the bomb. Force Japan to surrender. Save American lives. The moral implications will be debated for decades. But in August 1945, to the men making the decision, it's simple. End the war. August 6, 1945, 2:45 a.m. Tinian Island, Marianas. A-B-29, named Enola Gay, after the pilot's mother, sits on the runway. In its bomb bay, Little Boy, the uranium bomb. 9,700 pounds. 10 feet long. Equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. Pilot, Colonel Paul Tibbets. Crew, 12 men. Mission, drop the first atomic bomb ever used in warfare. Takeoff is smooth. The bomb is armed in flight, safety precaution in case they crash on takeoff. 6 hours to the target. Hiroshima, Japan's 7th largest city. Population 340,000. A major military headquarters. Important port and industrial centre. It's largely untouched by bombing. Residents wonder why. Some think the Americans are saving it for their own use after the war. 7 a.m. Japanese radar detects 3 aircraft approaching. Air raid sirens sound. People take shelter. 7:30 a.m. The all clear sounds. Only 3 planes. Not a bombing raid. Probably just reconnaissance. People return to their daily routines. Going to work. Opening shops. Children heading to school. 8:15 and 17 seconds a.m. 31,060 feet above Hiroshima. Bombs away. Little boy drops. The Enola Gay banks sharply away, trying to get as far from the blast as possible in the 43 seconds of fall time. 8:16 a.m. Detonation altitude, 1,843 feet above the city. The fireball reaches 5,000 degrees Celsius. The temperature of the sun's surface. Everything within a half-mile radius is vaporized instantly. People directly below the explosion leave only shadows burned into walls and pavement. Human beings turn to ash in a microsecond. The blast wave travels outward at over 700 miles per hour. Buildings are flattened to a radius of 1 mile. Seriously damaged out to 5 miles. Flash burns from thermal radiation occur up to 2 miles away. Clothing patterns are burned into skin. Eyes are melted. Survivors wander in shock through burning streets. Some have skin hanging from their arms like rags. Others are burned so badly they're unrecognizable as human. They beg for water. Those who drink from rivers or streams often die immediately, their bodies too burned to process the water. Peak of dawn, the survivors call it. The flash boom. Within 30 minutes, black rain begins to fall. Radioactive fallout mixed with debris and water vapor. Heavy, oily drops that stain everything they touch. Those caught in the rain absorb additional radiation. From the Enola Gay, the crew watches in stunned silence. A mushroom cloud rises 40,000 feet into the sky, visible from 360 miles away. Tail gunner Bob Curran, my God, what have we done? By the end of the day, 70 to 80,000 people are dead. By the end of the year, radiation sickness will bring the toll to 140,000. 4.7 square miles, 69% of the city, completely destroyed. August 7th, President Truman announces the bombing to the world. 16 hours ago, an American airplane dropped 1 bomb on Hiroshima. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. In Tokyo, the military government is paralyzed. Some refuse to believe a single bomb could do this. Others insist Japan must fight on regardless. Emperor Hirohito, normally above political decisions, begins to consider intervention. But before Japan can respond, 2 more catastrophes strike. August 9th, 1945, 3 a.m. The Soviet-Manchurian border. Stalin has kept his promise. In February at Yalta, he agreed to enter the war against Japan 3 months after Germany's defeat. Germany surrendered May 8th. 3 months is August 8th. Right on schedule, 1.5 million Soviet troops pour across the border into Japanese-occupied Manchuria and northern China. The Japanese Kwantung Army, once 1 million strong, is now a hollow shell. The best divisions have been sent south. What remains is undertrained, under-equipped, and scattered. The Soviet blitzkrieg is devastating. Japanese defensive lines collapse within hours. Whole divisions are surrounded and destroyed. It's yet another catastrophe for Japan. Now they're fighting the Americans in the Pacific, facing atomic bombs from the air, and being overrun by the Soviet Union in the north. But August 9th also brings a second atomic bomb. The primary target, Kokura, a city with major military arsenals. B-29. Boxcar takes off from Tinian at 3:49 a.m. Pilot, Major Charles Sweeney. Bomb, Fat Man, the plutonium device. They reach Kokura at 10:44 a.m. But the city is obscured by clouds and smoke from an earlier bombing raid. After 3 passes with no visibility, Sweeney makes a decision. Divert to the secondary target. Nagasaki. Nagasaki. A major port city. 240,000 people. Home to Mitsubishi shipyards and arms factories. Hilly terrain will limit the blast effects. It's not an ideal target. But Boxcar is running low on fuel. They have one chance. 11:02 a.m. Fat Man explodes at 1,650 feet above the Urakami Valley. 21 kilotons. More powerful than Hiroshima. But the bomb falls over a mile off target, into a valley instead of over the city center. The hills contain some of the blast. Damage is less than Hiroshima, but still catastrophic. 35 to 40,000 killed immediately. Another 40,000 by year's end from radiation. August 9th, late evening. Tokyo. The Emperor's underground air raid shelter. An emergency meeting of the Supreme War Council, Japan's 6 most powerful leaders. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki and Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo argue for surrender. The war is lost. Further resistance is pointless. War Minister Korachika Anami, Army Chief of Staff Yoshijiro Umezu, and Navy Chief of Staff Soemu Toyoda insist on continuing the fight. Japan has never surrendered in its history. Better death than dishonor. The vote is 3-3. Deadlock. Prime Minister Suzuki does something unprecedented. He asks Emperor Hirohito to break the tie. The Emperor speaks. I cannot bear to see my innocent people suffer any longer. The time has come when we must bear the unbearable. He votes for surrender. August 10th, Japan sends its response through neutral Switzerland. They will accept the Potsdam Declaration, unconditional surrender, with one condition. The emperor must remain sovereign. Secretary of State James Burns crafts the American response. No conditional surrender. But the emperor may remain, subject to the authority of the supreme commander of Allied powers. Translation: Hirohito can keep his title, but will answer to General MacArthur. August 11th through 14th, Japan debates. The hardliners want to reject the terms and fight to national suicide. Military officers plot a coup to prevent surrender. But on August 14th, Hirohito calls a second meeting and again commands acceptance. I swallow my tears and give my sanction to the proposal to accept the Allied proclamation. August 14th, 7 p.m. Washington time. President Truman announces Japan's surrender. Times Square erupts. Confetti falls like snow. Strangers embrace and kiss. London celebrates. Paris celebrates. Moscow celebrates. The war is over. August 15th, noon Tokyo time. For the first time in history, the Japanese people hear their emperor's voice. The broadcast is in formal court Japanese, difficult for common people to understand. But the message is clear. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. The ultimate understatement is less than #3, 0# is greater than. We have resolved to pave the way for a grand peace for all the generations to come by enduring the unendurable and suffering what is insufferable. Japan has surrendered. Most Japanese troops obey immediately. Such is the emperor's divine authority. Some hardline officers commit suicide rather than accept defeat. War Minister Anami performs seppuku the night before the broadcast. In Manchuria, Soviet forces continue fighting for another week. Stalin wants to grab as much territory as possible. Only on August 22nd does he order a ceasefire. On isolated Pacific islands, some Japanese garrisons don't receive word for weeks or months. A few holdouts will hide in jungles for years. The last Japanese soldier won't surrender until 1974, 29 years after the war ended. But for all practical purposes, the war is over. September 2nd, 1945, 9 a.m. Tokyo Bay. The USS Missouri, an Iowa-class battleship, sits in the harbor. Surrounded by dozens of Allied warships from America, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, France, the Netherlands. On the Missouri's deck, a simple table covered with green felt. 9 a.m., the Japanese delegation arrives. Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu, limping from an assassination attempt years earlier, climbs aboard. General Yoshijiro Umezu, Army Chief of Staff, follows. Both men's faces are expressionless. The humiliation is total. 9:04 a.m., Shigemitsu signs the instrument of surrender. 9:08 a.m. General Douglas MacArthur signs for the Allied powers. It is my earnest hope, MacArthur says, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. Representatives from all Allied nations sign. China, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, Australia, Canada, France, Netherlands, New Zealand. 9:25 a.m. The ceremony ends. As the Japanese delegation departs, 2,000 Allied aircraft roar overhead. B-29s, fighters, carrier aircraft. A demonstration of the overwhelming power that defeated Japan. World War II is officially over. 6 years and 1 day after it began. The most destructive conflict in human history has ended. Not with a whimper, but with 2 atomic blasts that announced humanity's capacity for total destruction. The world will never be the same is less than #3, 0#. September 2nd, 1945, 9:25 a.m. Tokyo Bay. The ceremony on the USS Missouri has ended. The war is officially over. But the silence on deck is heavy. 6 years and 1 day. September 1st, 1939 to September 2nd, 1945. Between these dates, the world tore itself apart. 70 to 85 million dead. The exact number will never be known. The Soviet Union, 27 million. Nearly 14% of the entire population. China, 15 to 20 million. Poland, 6 million. Germany, 7 million. Japan, 3 million. Every nation bled. Entire cities ceased to exist. Warsaw, 90% destroyed. Hamburg, Dresden, Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Europe's economy shattered. Japan's industry in ruins. Millions of refugees with no homes to return to. And the Holocaust. 6 million Jews systematically murdered in death camps. Roma, disabled people, political prisoners, millions more. Never again became the rallying cry. But the question remains, how could it happen at all? The world emerging from the ruins is not the world that entered the war. Germany divided into 4 zones. Berlin split, despite being deep in Soviet territory. Eastern Europe falls behind Churchill's Iron Curtain. The war to defeat totalitarianism leaves half of Europe under totalitarian rule. October 1945, the United Nations forms, replacing the failed League of Nations. But the great powers who won the war are already becoming rivals. And hanging over everything, the bomb. Humanity now possesses the power to destroy itself. In 1949, the Soviets test their own atomic weapon. The arms race begins. Mutually assured destruction. The world will live under the shadow of nuclear annihilation for the next half-century. The old empires are broken. Britain and France, exhausted and bankrupt, lose their colonies. India, Indonesia, Indochina gain independence. Two superpowers emerge, the United States and the Soviet Union. Europe, which dominated global politics for centuries, is diminished, divided, dependent. The Cold War begins before the Hot War even ends. From D-Day to Hiroshima, 453 days. In those 15 months, 20 million died. Hitler dead in his bunker beneath burning Berlin. Hirohito forced to tell his people to endure the unendurable. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12 years. Imperial Japan's dreams ended in atomic fire. The soldiers who fought came home changed, carrying memories they couldn't speak about. They built the post-war world, but the scars remained. Today, the last veterans are gone or going. Soon, there will be no one left who remembers. But the lessons remain. That appeasement invites catastrophe. That freedom requires vigilance. That ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage and extraordinary evil. From the beaches of Normandy to the mushroom clouds over Japan. This was the final chapter. 453 days that ended one world and birthed another. A world we still inhabit, built on the ashes of 60 million dead. May we never forget.